What was the big rumor in your high school did turn out to be true? When I was a freshman, some seniors were counterfeiting money. This was around 2004 to 2005. They made some pretty convincing bills and spent them around town, including the school cafeteria. That year I learned that the Secret Service has a counterfeit investigations department. That the English teacher had been sleeping with students. I found out when I was a freshman in 2008. Fast forward 8 years later. The chemistry teacher got caught and decided to bring the English teacher down with him to get some heat off his back. A total of 3 teachers went to jail. Yeah, phys ed teacher here. We moved into town when I was a freshman. The girls warned me to stay away from the phys ed teacher. Not a problem. I hated phys ed. A couple years later, several girls came forward about having sex with him. He apparently was one of those that claimed that his wife didn't understand him. And all that. He was in love with said student, but he couldn't get away from his evil wife. Except that she found out. And dumped his disgusting ass. Once the girl of the week found out he was single, she was ecstatic because now they could be together forever. Which of course was not what the teacher wanted. So he dumped her. Once that girl started talking. Then the others realized that they had all been played. There was an 18-year-old freshman who was pregnant. And there was a joke spread that this was her 4th kid. They said she was first pregnant at 12 years old, and that was why she never finished 9th grade. I actually made friends with her because we both walked the mile in PE. And I felt bad that people were spreading this rumor and making fun of someone who obviously is trying to better themselves for their baby. Well, turns out, it was actually her 5th kid. She had one set of twins at the age of 13. Then at 14 she was trying to be a mother of 2 and finished 9th grade. But she got pregnant again and dropped out. I realize now that the entire situation was very concerning. I hope she got some guidance. That a new student was actually a police officer. He was, and the idiots were busted for selling Drew Gus. Was it at the school on Jump Street? No, but worse, I'm pretty sure the local police got the idea from that movie. I told you the drug dealers were stupid. That an English teacher was using heroin. It's pretty sad actually. He was just a regular guy who destroyed his knee. So after surgery he got painkillers. Got hooked on them. And then eventually started using heroin. Nobody really believed it until he abruptly went on leave. He was gone for most of the school year, and when he eventually got sober and came back, he told his story to the students to try to show them how dangerous that stuff is. And confirmed everything to be true. That one of the English teachers used to physically assault kids. No one believed it because he was elderly and very kind. One day he told our class that back in the 80s when he was teaching, any time a kid got mouthy or started a fight in his classroom, he would pick them up physically and throw them out of his class. He gave a kid a concussion once because he bounced his head off a locker. They sent him to anger management classes, but he stayed teaching at the school until his retirement. My quite elderly math teacher threw a kid out of their classroom while still in their desk because the student was being a sheethead. The school fired him, and the kid's parents sued the school on my teacher's behalf for unlawful termination because they knew how much of a sheethead their kid was, and the school settled by paying him to retire. I miss that man. He was a great teacher. Athletics coordinator was fudging documents on kids' addresses so they would be able to go to our school instead of others in the district. We won like 5 state championships that year. On a ski trip, the phys ed teacher allegedly poured the science teacher. Someone saw him go into her room in the middle of the night. They denied it, but years later they got married. Similar tale here, but it was the French teacher and the Spanish/Italian teacher. They ended up married and having a kid in the end. Ooh la la. There were rumors for years about some of the younger male teachers and female students. Some of the teachers ended up leaving never to be spoken of again. Others stuck around. But nothing was ever substantiated. Then while my class was on our senior trip, the music teacher got arrested. Then 2 more teachers the following year. Then several years went by and the school abruptly announced it was shutting down for financial reasons, 2 weeks before the end of the school year. The week after it closed for good. Another teacher got arrested. So yeah, I'd say the rumors turned out to be true. There was a 22-year-old first-year teacher at my high school's senior year. It was obvious she and a 19-year-old student both really wanted a relationship. As far as I know, they both held off until after graduation, then started dating during summer. The big rumor wasn't about my high school but a school on the east side of town. The rumor was, a bunch of girls were running a prostitution ring out of the school. It turns out it was true. PD went undercover and busted about a dozen girls. At my high school, 2 kids who were cousins were dating. They always denied it, but a lot of people still believed it. They did look weirdly similar. But a lot of people just chalked it up to coincidence. About a year later they broke up and totally stopped interacting. Rumors started that their parents got involved or found out and shut it down. And it was again left to speculation. At our 5-year reunion, somebody who knew their family said that it turned out the rumor about them being cousins wasn't true. They were half-siblings and didn't even know until their parents put it together one day. So kind of true? For years there was a rumor of a secret room in the gyms that had a pool table in it. It was one of the first things you learned about the school, and despite many lies told by pupils seeking short-lived glory, it was strenuously denied by staff at the school. About 5 years after I left the school, it was demolished. The school was, during my time, the second lowest Ofsted-ranked school in the country, and had a Channel 4 documentary filmed about its staff who dealt with the hardest kids to teach. Its demise was not a shock. They stopped intake of new pupils and ran down the clock on those still there, but due to some delays the handover from school site to the new building developers, a small retirement village and health center, the janitorial staff were kept on to keep the place safe and secure over a 2 or 3 month period. On their last couple of days they did a full site-wide inspection, and someone decided to take photos along the way. They went into all the buildings, large or minor, and into staff areas seldom seen by students but not controversial. The photos documented the areas of the school that has begun to be disused and abandoned in its final few years, already damaged or graffiti-strewn. Old furniture piled in that classroom we did year 8 IT in. The untuned piano in the hall already sold off, or given away. Who knows? A couple of years later, one of the people who went on this mystery tour uploaded the full set to a now deleted Facebook profile. For those of who attended the school in its final years, it was interesting to see what had become of the place we spent 5 years becoming young adults in. Seeing perspectives from angles new to us, such as up on the roofs of the single-story outbuildings. And in the last couple of photos, a tour into the dark, dank boiler room that served both of the equally ancient gyms. And almost at the very end, a photo of those janitorial staff playing a game of pool. The biggest rumor in my high school was that one of the science teachers / baseball coach was banging the health teacher / volleyball coach. He was at every volleyball game. She came to most of the baseball games. People would say they saw his truck at her apartment complex. Somebody said they saw them together at a concert 200 miles from home. Both of them constantly got asked if they were messing around on their boyfriend / girlfriend with each other, and both denied it for the entire year. Yeah. Turned out they'd been dating for 3 years like adults can do, and just kept it a secret from students because high school students suck. They got married the summer after I graduated. So 2 consenting single adults were dating consensually, and all the high school kids were spreading rumors and speculation. Teenagers are terrible and should mind their own business. It was a few years after I graduated. But a student baked cookies for their entire history class and handed them out one day. Several days later, the student informed everyone that she had actually baked her recent grandfather's ashes into the cookies. And so everyone had eaten some of her dead grandpa. A lot of folks just thought it was a bizarre stunt until some of the cookies that hadn't been eaten were sent to the local PD for testing. And sure enough, contained human remains. I was in college and was seeing headlines about the school because it was briefly international news, I think. And had to text some of my friends that still had younger siblings at the school so I could find out what happened. That there was an orgy several weekends involving a dozen students and at least a dozen adults. Age of consent way back then was 16. A bunch of the cool kids spent a lot of the summer at the lake cabin somebody's parents owned. The lake house next door was owned by a couple who would host swinging weekends there. At some point the two groups started hanging out together because high school kids love free alcohol, and eventually the students started staying for the orgies. That rumor blew up my entire senior year, and the longer it went the more it got to be obvious something had happened. Then it was obvious what had happened. This was back in the late 1980s with the AIDS scare and anti-gay paranoia. The whole story came out in a drunken argument by two of the girls involved. The reason it had been kept secret for so long was that everyone involved had hooked up with the same six at some point. That the 10th grade English teacher had a thing for students. I remember when I was in his class he would make me stay behind after everyone had left just to talk. Freaked me out a bit, but otherwise harmless. Years later my sister, who was now in his class, told me he was recently suspended for blackmailing a student of his into going to dinner with him if she wanted a better grade. Her parents found out and reported it to the principal. Turns out all these rumors about him being an absolute creep were all true. Last I heard he was fired, but he was old enough at that point, he was close enough to retirement. That some kid had built a room in the ceiling above a closet to hang out and hide his stash of contraband snacks/sodas that he'd sell in the hallways. He literally cut a hole in the ceiling of a closet within a closet and snuck a mini fridge up there. Only got caught when he ducked up by plugging too many things in and caused power issues in the school. They had an inspector come in to find the issue, and he was like, "Why is there an extension cord going up into the ceiling?" Kid got wind of it and managed to clear everything out, had a rug, chair, lamp, and other stuff in addition to the mini fridge by the end of the day. They still caught him a few days later. But it was impressive. My sister's form teacher got a student pregnant. I mean, he did end up leaving, but there's still multiple rumors of him being in prison. Going to prison is a form of leaving. That one of the students in our junior year, who reportedly had a serious drug habit, was snorting coke. Gym teacher found him in the boys' locker room bathroom snorting a line off the toilet seat. Kid spent his summer break in rehab. Came back to graduate a clean senior. Then started up the coke again. Haven't heard much about him since. Had a guy in HS who was known as the party guy. He was always the life of the party doing crazy shit. There were rumors about him being on all kinds of heavy stuff. But most assumed that was just gossip and he was only really drinking/smoking weed. Not saying that's good for a teenager, but people were saying he was using like black tar heroin. Turns out the gossip was right. He OD'd on some kind of cocktail of Drew Gus's freshman year in college. Not a speedball, but something similar. His death really shook a lot of people and opened up others' eyes to addiction. Looking back at all those parties he was so much fun at, people realized he was just so ducked up and high. It was really sad. So there was a rumor going around that a teacher was a real creep, and had been saying things to some female students that made them really uncomfortable. I had a class with this teacher, and he always gave me uncomfortable vibes. A few girls had even claimed they had seen him looking at their chests, but no one could really prove anything. One day in the middle of class we get a knock at the door and 3 sheriff's deputies enter the room and tell everyone to remain calm and then inform our teacher they have a warrant for his arrest. They place him in handcuffs and take him out of the room. Apparently he had been making very sexual advances towards one of the girls in his class. And her father was a deputy for our sheriff's department. She had told him what happened and he had a warrant placed for his immediate arrest. Never saw the teacher again, but everyone saw his mugshot. The really ducked up part is whatever he said to her messed her up so much that she dropped out of school and was homeschooled until graduation. Poor girl. Aside from the usual teacher having sex with student rumors, there are a couple that both turned out to be true-ish. The abortion list, the drug dealer teacher. I went to high school in the 80s. The abortion list at the school was a thing, but not quite in the way that we thought it was. The rumor was that the school kept a list of all of the girls who had abortions. That wasn't true. The school had a list of discreet abortion providers that was given to girls who wanted/needed it. Confirmed to me by the principal several years later. The second was the drug dealing teacher. We had a Spanish teacher who was alleged to be a big-time drug dealer. Lived in a huge house that there was no way he could afford on a teacher's salary. Drove fancy cars, 2-3x a teacher's annual salary. Took lavish international vacations, frequently to South America, etc. When I was a freshman, I heard these rumors, and they kept up all the way until midway through my senior year when he was arrested at school by the FBI. Turns out when he was younger, he had run several flights of pot into the country and made a bunch of money. And then got out, so that part was true, and became a teacher. Turns out he was involved in all kinds of mail and wire fraud to sustain his lifestyle. Last I heard, he had gotten out of prison after 15 or so years. And then, the rumor is he had murdered someone, and was back in prison for life. That the black van in the parking lot was a big-time drug dealer, and that's where the senior student who was dealing pot and coke got his supply. This was in White as Duck, Northeast US upper middle class suburbia. Turns out it was actually the local police collecting enough evidence on him to jump him in the parking lot after school, in front of everyone. With about 5 police cars too many for one 18-year-old kid, and arrest him. They waited until 2 days after he turned 18 to do this. Likely so there'd be no doubt about trying him as an adult. Texas public school before the reform. Schools were financed and run by the tax revenue of the neighborhood. You can imagine how that worked out. Rumor was they were dumping teachers that were going to be fired from a higher income schools into our lower income school. Turned out not only were they but some of the teachers were being fired for things like giving Drew Gus to students, sleeping with students, and being drunk during class. The guy who taught chemistry was a notorious pedo, and they were just like, give him to the poor kids, they don't matter. Between junior and senior year, our janitor suddenly stopped working there. Rumors began to fly and a friend jokingly told me that he was suspended 6 months for slapping a hooker. Turns out it wasn't true. But it says a lot that most of us believed it. Turns out, all that happened was he hooked up with a student immediately after graduation and felt too ashamed to come back. Another interesting layer to the janitor. There was one storage room with a futon in it that we're pretty sure he lived on. He had keys to the building, knew the passcode for the alarms, etc. So it made sense that he'd sleep there after everyone left. He also had a blowtorch collection in one of the closets. I went to a school for troubled teens. The structure there was very different. We weren't allowed to smoke, even if we were 18. Or even have relationships, like no dating. Period. It was a boarding school, so once you were far enough in the program they would let you visit home for a couple days. A bunch of wild shit came out after one particular home visit. One kid lost his virginity. Got snitched on. And then all of a sudden like 20 kids were pulled out of class and brought to the dining area. It turned out a bunch of kids had been dating, screwing, and smoking. And it all came out. They hair drug tested everyone, and then that group was the first of our school to be on out-of-school suspension, which created a fun new threat for everyone. It feels ridiculous typing this up now in my 30s because so ducking what? Some consenting teenagers ducked each other. But at the time it was mind-blowing. Thankfully that school has closed its doors since. That I was hacking into the computer systems. Because of this, my only failing grade my senior year was ironically the computer courses. To be clear, I was failed. I did not fail. I got perfect scores on everything in that class. I was a student tech at my school, so I had admin access to everything. This is why she thought I was hacking. The teacher simply marked my grades as zeros for that class. I got a 0 in that class. So the day after school technically ended, I logged into the system under admin login and changed my grades back to what they were. I had all of the papers still showing I got perfect scores in case there was a fight. There never was. Finally, something I can shine out. Rumors this teacher was doing Drew Gus, mainly talked about coke, and was going off the deep end. Rumors started on a ski trip when we were on the bus, and he forced all of us to watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Why that's when it started, but everybody was saying he was wasted/high, and put that on to trip out. A week or two later the news got around that he broke 2 windows with his fist. Apparently trying to heal a bee, he just had to punch so hard he broke both windows. A week or so after that, arrested for chain robberies over a weekend where he robbed a gas station about 45 minutes from our school with a hammer. He got caught because he robbed the same one back-to-back nights, and the next night they were more prepared. The mugshot was the icing on the cake. Beck used the dude was clean cut and sharp every day at school. Not so much that night. Still a cool guy. In fact, maybe even cooler now. Mugshot. Hot. Male. Chemistry teacher hits on hot. Popular. Female student. Student reports it. Teacher gets fired. Nobody outside the investigation knew what actually happened until years later. But we had our suspicions. And we were right. Which was more like this. Hot. Popular bitch. In the daddy's credit card clique. Hits on married. Hot teacher. Hot teacher shuts her down. Spoiled bitch reports he tried to kiss her. Gets him fired. Teacher finds another job teaching adults computer skills. Investigation finds spoiled bitch lied in retaliation because she got shot down. School asks him to come back. Teacher says, nope. It was before I was there, but there was a rumor of a popular teacher sleeping with one of his students after she had turned 18 but before she had graduated. Almost positive it was true because they got married within 3 to 4 months of her graduation. They had twins, got divorced, and he was a bitter but still popular teacher when I came through a few years later. Never got fired because they were never able to prove the relationship started while she was still a student. There were also rumors that our OG high school built before WW2 had a large bomb shelter and tunnels that went about a mile to some of the buildings in town. But the building got a pretty extensive remodel after our new high school was built, and I was never able to confirm existence of the shelter or tunnels. Wouldn't surprise me if the shelter was real, but the tunnels into town seemed a bit far. High school science teacher, with a high school-age daughter of his own, was sleeping with one of the girls in my class. True. His wife divorced him when I was a senior, and he married her shortly after she graduated. They're still married. And I recently got invited to their 40th wedding anniversary. A couple of years later, one of my college professors married one of my friends. They were married for about 20 years. Until he died. All I can say is it was a different time. It was creepy. But nobody thought to do anything about it. In 5th grade there was a rumor that me and another student were having sex. I was teased relentlessly. Gained weight. Stopped going to school. Became depressed. It was true. All my teachers overheard the gossip. Not a single adult ever asked me about it. I told a friend/neighbor who told her mother. The mother cornered me in the street in front of my house and told me I wasn't allowed to speak to her daughter ever again. She didn't tell my parents, who she saw pretty much daily. I was 10 years old. There was a rumor while I was in high school that someone I went to grade school with was dating one of our grade school teachers. I heard it while I was catching up with grade school friends as a sophomore in high school. Well, last year found out it was sort of true. Turns out that teacher was actually our *ping and doing worse things to my grade school teammate. And also turned out she wasn't the first one either. And our school covered it up, Catholic school. Also, since it took her years to come forward. We're now 33, nothing can be done about it in our state. She managed to get a restraining order years before. And he had violated it multiple times but was only arrested once. I wasn't friends with her then. But I am now. And am glad we finally put aside our differences to make a change. In working with Ohio State, we are working to change the Speak Up laws to include whenever a victim comes forward. Not just up till they're 30. Most victims have repressed memories of these things that take years to surface. We are making a change together. Making a positive out of the negative. She is now one of the strongest survivors Eve ever met. Finally, I have a good one or two. First, high school PE teacher my senior year. She was super cool. Like Duck running the mile and getting graded on our times. Participation? Duck that noise. Great senior year. 1 year later, she gets fired for showing up visibly drunk in her pajamas holding a teddy bear. She was fired during first period. This is after she taught several classes at around 3 p.m. Second and most scandalous, first PE teacher's replacement. Super butch ex-softball pro yada yada yada. I know because my younger siblings. She's a hard as but grows a soft spot for one girl in particular. This just so happens to be the youngest daughter of a super religious and connected family in the school district. Sheet breaks loose. She gets fired. Girl graduates. They marry. Girls cheats on former teacher. More drama. This is still a sore subject in the area. AP English teacher would send nudes to students. Turned out to only be half true. We all got iPads to use for the school year. She took photos of herself apparently for her husband in one of the bathrooms. A student used her iPad for something as she didn't know quite how to use it yet. Found the picture and airdropped it to himself and his buddies. One of their girlfriends found the pic on her BFS iPad and told her parents. The teacher got suspended for a couple months, which I'm assuming was to wait for things to die down. A couple years later, one of my friends who I graduated with posted the pic on Insta as proof he still had it. Felt terrible for the teacher because once that sheet is out there it'll never go away completely. She works as a real estate agent now. In my high school there was a rumor during my last year that the school's librarian was a sex predator. The majority of our student body dismissed it. A few years after I graduated, he was brought up on charges and convicted of multiple counts of possession of child porn and luring minors. He was actually a pedo. Really surprised me had someone asked me before he was convicted. I would have went to bat for him. No one I hung out with ever picked up that kind of vibe. He was one of the more beloved teachers in the school. Still kind of freaks me out that a legitimate predator was in our midst, and we all adored him. From my understanding, he never did anything to any student, and the extent of his activities were outside of the school. But still, freaky. The stone face game. The guys were from our high school. The girls from a different one. Like 5 or 6 guys on our hockey team claimed that at a party. They got 2 girls to play the stone face game with them. The guys sit around a circular table with their pants pulled down, and the girls go around underneath sucking them off. And they have to keep a straight/blank face. Whoever wins by going the longest without making a face gets a full BJ from the 2 girls. Most people did not believe them. High school hockey players tend to be douche bags anyway, and that just sounded like something that was 100% made up. But then the two girls confirmed it was true and had happened exactly how the guys claimed. It was interesting. Because before that, the people who did believe that it had happened were having a field day calling the girls sluts, whores, skanks, no respect for themselves, etc. And while I didn't say any of those things, I'll admit my 16-year-old brain thought them too. But after they admitted to it, it was like everyone, including myself, had much more respect for them. I know for me personally, I was so impressed that they just owned it that all of the negative thoughts I'd had about it were pushed to the back of my mind. I ended up becoming friends with one of the girls when we were in college, and she was really chill about it. Said she wouldn't do it again and it was a stupid thing to do. But luckily nothing too horrible came of it besides some people being big digs to them about it. I still have a ton of respect for her for approaching it the way that she and the other girl did. But yeah, I was pretty surprised to find out it was a true rumor, lol. Edit. Since people want to make this a feminism thing, I specifically said that those guys were already known to be douche bags. The girls were judged for this incident specifically. The guys were already known as slutty womanizers that most girls stayed away from. Yes, a double standard exists. But this particular case did not have a double standard. People thought everyone involved in it was gross. The reason I mentioned the opinions of the girls shifting is because at first people thought maybe it wasn't true the guys were all saying it was. So of course they were already being judged. Also, I'm not going to lie to y'all and pretend that a bunch of young teenagers in the 2000s were all sex positive and pro-slut culture. That isn't how it was, so that isn't how I said it was. Also, do whatever you want if you're being safe. But I would still be skeptical of people who did this today. The guys and the girls. It's a somewhat gross activity no matter what your gender or age is. Extremely fundamentalist school. The principal was banging his secretary. Secretary's hubby worked at the school. Principal's wife and daughter were teachers at the school. His son was a student there. As the story went, she ended up wanting to break it off. He didn't. She insisted. And he still didn't want to. She told her husband. And then went back to her home country for a few months to get away. Then came back and he wanted to resume the affair. She told him to stop or she'd involve his family. He didn't stop. So lore has it that secretary and her hubby went to principal's house one evening and he had a dinner party. Everyone was tossed out and shit went down. Principal was ejected from the school for his moral failings. And ended up being a royal AZ hole in the school system elsewhere instead. We had a girl, Ashley, at our high school who broke her hymen with a stapler. Everyone had heard about it. But no one knew if that was true or not. Turns out she had recorded it and sent it to her then BF, who then showed everyone once they broke up after she cheated on him as an attempt to prove the rumors were true and to make her life even more hell. Everyone called her Staples from then on. It's been almost 10 years since that happened. And if you ask anyone who went to my high school, remember Staples? They know exactly who you're talking about. I had a teacher who was rumored to be having unethical conduct with minor students. To say the least. He was like 24 or 25. Just recently graduated. And he said/did things at the time that I didn't really think were that weird. But now that I'm closer to his 25 than I am to 15, I look back and realize how ducking creepy he was. Here's a list of things that stand out to me as red flags. Me and this girl I was talking to got caught vaping in class by him. He just said, "Making good decisions over there?" And we were like, "Yes, sir," and he was just like, "All right, I'll take your word for it." And I'm convinced that he let that one slide because of the girl. He would often participate in out-of-school activities, swimming, field trips, etc., with female students. He would do romantic gestures, such as buying them things and offering his jacket to them. This alone maybe wouldn't be that weird, but combined with everything else, it gives me chills. He would add girls from our class on his personal social media accounts, Snapchat, Instagram, etc., and even exchange phone numbers with them. This was weird because it was only female students. And he even did it with girls who didn't participate in activities outside of school that he was supposed to be supervising. He would always be the cool teacher, but in a super weird way. He felt more like another student than a teacher. We had a lengthy in-class discussion about Rasputin's Pen 15. And a girl pulled up a picture that was supposedly it on her phone and showed everyone. Which he was just totally cool with. The discussion itself is something that maybe, without all of the other context, and with the right amount of tact and keeping things somewhat professional but cracking a few jokes would have been okay, but looking back this was just a creepy incident. Anyways, he was not a good teacher. He taught an AP class and everyone failed the AP exam pretty much. I passed that class and moved on to the next grade. And then he got busted for exchanging nudes with underage girls as young as 14 or 15. He had sex with a 17-year-old girl. But this is not illegal where I live, as the age of consent is 16. So I don't think he ever got charged with that one. I believe he got 4 or 5 years in jail. And the general consensus is that he will go to another county and continue being a teacher once he gets out. Because there are some counties in my state that are desperate for teachers and are known to hire teachers that they shouldn't be hiring. I don't even think he had to register as a sex offender. So this situation was not as bad as it could have been. But I'm worried that he will get out and maybe do something far worse. And he got off very light. He actually will be getting out very soon. The theater teacher was grooming and having sex with students. I was in the last group of children groomed by him. He left when our very small, handpicked by him theater class graduated. Fortunately, he was waiting until they were 18 and graduated to have sex with them. But that's a depressingly low bar. He's moved on to teaching college kids now. Must have been sick of being harassed for his actions by faculty and parents. Nothing ever came of it because he was never caught. And I think most of the group of students who were groomed along with me would swear on their lives that he never did anything inappropriate. But he used sexual paraphernalia in one show where a student was strapped down. And another time he did an exercise where by the end, 2 students were heavily petting/making out while he watched. To my knowledge, I'm the only one from that group who'd call that grooming. He also had us run into his arms one time as a trust exercise. Jesus, it's weird to recount all that. Wildly favored teacher got a BJ from a student a couple of times. Turned out to be true. She reported him after a blue dress-like incident. Sucks that he was a creep. Because everyone liked him. She ended up finishing the second half of her senior year at a different school after he was fired and charged. Another rumor was that an English teacher and yearbook head person teacher, I guess, was a massive creep. A couple of years left, they confiscated 2 school computers with so much child porn on them. Dude used school computers to try to hide his stuff. He was arrested and convicted. I don't want to give too many details, but I went to school with this pedophile that has links to a high-profile child abduction and murder many years ago. No clue if he did that one or not. But what he got caught for was him videotaping himself with little kids. I don't generally wish violence on people, but I freely wish it on anyone who would hurt a little kid like that. I hope he gets his ass beat daily in prison. Real freaking creep. Like the stuff nightmares are made out of. Rumors in school were that he was having incestuous relations with his mom alongside his brother, etc. Real backwoods shit.